Bills Mafia, training camp is finally here, and if you've been waiting all offseason for real, unfiltered updates straight from the front office, buckle up, because General Manager Brandon Beane just held court with reporters and dropped an absolute treasure trove of information. We're talking injury updates, position battles, honest reflections on a young quarterback's maturity, and a genuinely fascinating look into how this new coaching staff is approaching a completely retooled defense. Grab a seat, because there is a lot to unpack here. Let's start with the obvious storyline hanging over this entire training camp: the arrival of new head coach Joe Brady. Beane didn't shy away from acknowledging just how much is different this year. There's a fresh energy that comes with any new coaching staff, especially one bringing significant defensive changes, including a full shift to a 3-4 scheme. New voices, new systems, and naturally, some early bumps in the road are all part of the process. But Beane made it clear he's excited about the plan Brady has put together, noting how hard the first-year head coach has worked this offseason to prepare for balancing his dual roles as both head coach and offensive play caller. One thing Beane emphasized repeatedly is patience. His words were simple but pointed. This is a one-day-at-a-time process. You don't build camaraderie, chemistry, or a full understanding of a brand-new defensive system overnight. It takes time, it takes reps, and it takes the entire organization staying locked in together, which is part of the reasoning behind the team's approach to their training camp setup this summer, deliberately keeping the group together and away from the usual distractions, much like other organizations around the league do with dedicated camp retreats. Now let's get into how Beane described Joe Brady's early leadership style, because this part is genuinely interesting. Beane explained that stepping into a general manager role forces you to follow the lead of whoever sits above you in the organizational structure, and now watching Brady take full command of an entire team, not just an offense, has been fascinating to witness. According to Beane, Brady carries a natural presence. He can be firm when he needs to be, but he balances that with being a genuinely good, relatable leader. Beane even mentioned catching Brady getting on a few players during practice, which in context was described as a positive sign of a coach willing to hold his team accountable early. Perhaps most notably, Beane praised Brady for not coming in with a bulldozer mentality, trying to erase everything that came before him. Instead, Brady has taken a much more methodical approach, building on what has previously worked for this organization while adding his own unique tweaks along the way, all in pursuit of one specific goal: putting this team in position to compete for a championship. Now let's shift to one of the most talked about storylines of the entire offseason: the continued development of wide receiver Keon Coleman. If you followed this team closely, you know Coleman's first 2 seasons came with plenty of ups and downs, including some public scrutiny and benchings along the way. But according to Beane, anyone who truly knows Coleman personally can see a noticeable shift in his maturity heading into year 3. Beane described it almost like a light switch flipping on, with Coleman now understanding exactly what he could have done better during those first 2 years. Beane didn't shy away from being honest about the bumps along the way, but he was quick to remind everyone that plenty of young players go through growing pains early in their careers, himself included, reflecting back on his own early 20s. What stood out most to Beane wasn't just what Coleman has said, but how his own teammates have responded to him. In one particularly telling moment during a recent practice, Coleman dropped a pass, and instead of letting frustration creep in, several teammates immediately came over to encourage him. Then, on the very next play, a much more difficult one, Coleman came through and made the catch, with quarterback Josh Allen going right back to him without hesitation. Beane even referenced something Joe Brady said to him after warm-ups that day, essentially explaining that these unpredictable, uncontrollable moments, a slip, a drop, a fumble, are actually valuable tests of a player's mental toughness and how they respond in the very next opportunity. Watching that exact scenario play out in real time with Coleman left a strong impression on Beane. reinforcing his belief that this version of Coleman has genuinely turned a corner both on and off the field. When pressed on whether expectations are higher for Coleman this season given his growth, Beane offered a grounded, patient response. He explained that if Coleman continues preparing the right way, both on the field and off it, the results will naturally follow. Beane pointed back to flashes of Coleman's rookie season before injuries slowed him down, including a strong comeback performance against Baltimore, as evidence that the talent has always been there. The key now is consistency, and Beane sounds confident that Coleman's newfound maturity will help unlock that. Switching gears to the defensive side of the ball, Beane spent considerable time discussing exactly what excites him most about this retooled unit under new defensive coordinator Jim Leonhard. A number of players are being asked to adjust to new positions or techniques, some transitioning from a hand-in-the-dirt stance to standing up, others shifting from primarily outside alignments to more interior or hybrid roles. Beane emphasized that figuring out exactly how these pieces fit together at the defensive line level, then at linebacker, and finally within a safety room that features strong depth headlined by a player entering his third season and coming off a strong showing last year, will be one of the most fascinating storylines to track throughout camp and the preseason. Beane also took a moment to highlight some quieter leadership stories developing within that defensive room. He specifically mentioned veteran Bradley Chubb bringing rookie T.J. Parker down to Florida with him over the summer for extra training, with Chubb reportedly walking away impressed by the young player's commitment and work ethic. Beane framed it as exactly the kind of veteran mentorship that helps accelerate a young player's development and made it clear he's genuinely excited about how all these defensive pieces continue to come together. One name that came up repeatedly throughout the conversation was defensive tackle Ed Oliver. Beane revealed that Oliver was actually one of the very first names defensive coordinator Jim Leonhard brought up upon joining the coaching staff, dating back to conversations as early as January and February during the staff's assembly. According to Beane, Leonhard has a clear plan to get Oliver more favorable one-on-one matchups, pointing out that Oliver has consistently faced a significant number of double teams throughout his career, a strong indicator of how much respect opposing offensive coordinators have for his ability to disrupt plays. Beane referenced Oliver's near 10-sack season following his contract extension as proof of just how disruptive he can be when the circumstances align, and sounded optimistic about Leonhard's scheme unlocking even more of that potential this season. Now let's talk injuries, because there were several important updates here for Bills fans anxiously tracking key players. Starting with tight end Dalton Kincaid, Beane didn't hesitate when asked whether he expects a true breakout season if Kincaid can stay healthy. He pointed to Kincaid's strong rookie campaign as clear evidence of his talent, noting that any struggles over the past two injury-plagued seasons were never the result of a lack of preparation or effort. Beane even joked about Kincaid's noticeably improved physique after training out in California this offseason, describing him as looking chiseled. The clear message here: if Kincaid can simply stay on the field, the production should follow. On linebacker Matt Milano, Beane acknowledged it's one of those situations where the team has to actively hold him back given how eager he is to get back on the field. Beane described Milano as feeling confident in his recovery, though he was careful not to speak definitively on Milano's behalf regarding whether he feels exactly like he did before the injury. The plan appears to be a gradual ramp-up, with hopes of getting him some meaningful preseason reps to shake off the rust before Week 1. Similarly, cornerback Christian Benford's running mate Tre'Davious White wasn't directly addressed regarding a return, but Beane did confirm the front office maintains close relationships with familiar, trusted veterans, mentioning names like Micah Hyde and Jordan Phillips as examples of players the organization loves bringing back when the opportunity arises. It's clear depth at cornerback remains a position of real concern for Beane, who candidly admitted the position has given him the most angst in recent years, citing a frustrating pattern of significant injuries at that spot during past playoff runs. This concern was part of the motivation behind the off-season acquisition of veteran cornerback Dane Jackson, or as Beane referred to him, IGB, to bolster the room. Speaking of new additions, Beane also gave real insight into the thought process behind signing safety CJ Gardner-Johnso, a player he openly described as talented but polarizing throughout his career. Beane detailed the team's thorough vetting process, explaining how pro scouts identify available players heading into free agency and present detailed breakdowns of strengths and weaknesses to the coaching staff for discussion. According to Beane, Gardner-Johnson's history of bouncing between teams wasn't rooted in a lack of talent, but rather from being an intensely competitive player whose fire has occasionally boiled over. Beane emphasized that before finalizing the signing, the organization brought Gardner-Johnso in for an entire day of face-to-face conversations to ensure alignment on expectations. Beane described Gardner-Johnso as exactly the type of edge and fearless mentality this team wants heading into a Week 1 matchup in a notoriously hostile road environment, while making clear the expectation remains that he channels that competitive fire within acceptable boundaries. On the offensive line, Beane addressed the ongoing left guard competition, which he called one of the most important battles of the entire camp given its direct role in protecting quarterback Josh Allen. Newly signed veteran veteran Austin Corbett enters as an experienced, versatile option who started at 3 different positions last season, praised by Beane for his intelligence, leadership, and physical toughness. Standing in his way is younger developmental lineman Alec Anderson, who has quietly carved out a role as valuable depth and even filled in at tackle during a game last season. Beane described the competition as an exciting veteran versus youth battle, with both players carrying the right mindset heading into camp. There was also an interesting update regarding center Frank Granger, the young lineman who won a national championship at Georgia. Beane explained that a calf injury derailed Granger's entire rookie preseason last year, forcing him to spend significant time simply getting caught up once the season began. With returning starter Connor McGovern healthy, Granger didn't see much game action. But Beane emphasized this is a big year for him to show what he's capable of in camp and preseason action, especially given added competition at the position following the addition of veteran depth piece Lloyd Cushenberry. Receiver Josh Palmer's availability issues from last season were also addressed directly. Beane detailed how a hip drop tackle in an early season game against Atlanta ultimately led to injuries that lingered throughout the year, eventually forcing the team to shut him down. Beane praised Palmer's toughness in fighting through the pain, acknowledging how mentally difficult it can be for a player on a new contract to feel like he's letting his teammates down. The good news, according to Beane, is that Palmer is fully healthy heading into camp and in good spirits about his opportunities this season. Finally, Beane offered an encouraging update on a player working his way back from a serious injury on the physically unable to perform list, a young player Beane praised for his relentless, steady work ethic throughout the recovery process. Beane described him as someone who shows up like clockwork every single day, taking care of his body and controlling what he can control, regardless of setbacks along the way. While Beane was careful not to put a firm timetable on his return, he made clear this is a player the entire locker room is excited to eventually see back on the field. So there you have it, Bills Mafia, a full breakdown of everything Brandon Beane addressed as training camp gets rolling. A maturing young receiver turning the corner, a defense full of question marks but genuine excitement about the pieces in place, key injury updates on some of the most important names on the roster, and a new head coach already showing early signs of the kind of steady, authentic leadership this organization has been hoping for. There's still a long way to go before Week 1, but if these early camp conversations are any indication, there's plenty of reason for optimism heading into this season. All right, that's the full breakdown. Let us know down in the comments, which storyline are you most locked in on heading into camp? The left guard battle? Keon Coleman's development? How Ed Oliver fits into this new defense? Drop your thoughts, and if you're enjoying this kind of in-depth Bills coverage, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe right here at Buffalo Focus so you never miss a single update as training camp continues to unfold. Thanks for watching, Bills Mafia. Go Bills.